Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden, and we're also going to stick to my home county of Skåne here in the very south of the country. For this review we are returning to a brewery that has featured on the channel a good number of times before. We've had some really interesting beers from these guys over the years, but I think this one might be one of the quirkiest ones I've had from them yet, so I'm very curious about it. For this review then we are going to go to Landskrona, just a little bit to the north of me here in Lund, where I used to work as a science and maths teacher, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Brekeriet. So this one is the Lusse Lelle, which comes in at 6.5% ABV, and they're describing this one as a sour brewed with saffron, and it's part of their Sour Patch series. So this is a beer that they release every year. I think I don't know if they first released this back in like 2016 or something like that, but I know this, I have seen this one I think every year since 2017, but I just never got around to trying it. But yeah, it should be a really interesting one. From what I understand, this beer is related to the Lucille phenomenon that you have in Sweden, which is basically a tribute to St. Lucy, and I think it ends on the 13th of December, if I remember rightly. So the Swedes at this time of year, they eat these kind of S-shaped saffron buns that have the little raisins in them. They are lovely actually, and if you get the chance I recommend that you try them. But this is the beer that Brekeriet release every year to kind of celebrate that occasion as well. So yeah, I have to say, this one in terms of ingredients is probably one of the more quirky beers that I'm going to have from Brekeriet. I've had some really good beers from these guys over the years. My personal favourites would probably be Sour and Salt, Wrapped in Red, Purple Rain. I've had some other really good ones as well. Probably my favourite early on was the Swedish Ninja, which was a collaboration that they did with Pipeworks Brewing from over in Chicago in Illinois in the States. That one's always kind of stuck with me actually, but more recently we've had some really interesting beers in the big bottles. The King's Goblet was a really interesting one, and also the Nobel Ek was very good as well. We also had the Queen's Quad at one stage too, which was very interesting. So yeah, I've had some really good beers from these guys over the years. They're very well respected because they are kind of the original Swedish sour beer brewery, so if you get the chance to try some of their beers, I highly recommend that you do. I need to have a look at what's kind of in the Hansa Systembolaget next time I'm there, and pick out one or two more from Brekeriet and review some of the more kind of regular ones actually, because I haven't done that in quite a wee while actually. I've more been keeping up to date with the new stuff that they've been releasing. But yeah, curious to see how this one turns out. A 6.5% sour beer with saffron in it. You don't hear that every day of the week. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then. As always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Brekeriet before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the fairly near future. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you guys show the channel is massively appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Brekeriet then, on to my brewery notes. So Brekeriet, as I've told you before, were originally based in Djursholm, which is just outside of Malmö, but these days they're based a little bit further north in Landskrona. So the company was founded back in 2011 by the Ek brothers. This is Fredrik, Christian and Andre, and it's a specialist brewery in wild beers, sour ales, whatever you want to call them, using Brettanomyces and Lactobacillus. And these guys were the first brewery in Sweden who really did this, and as far as I'm aware, they are the only brewery in Sweden that are completely dedicated to sour beers still. Although in fairness, I have had one or two kind of normal beers from these guys over the years, but the sour beers in my mind are always a bit better, I have to say. But the original brewery that they had was based in the old brew house in Djursholm, which was actually a share brewery used by local farmers, a commune brewery if you like, but they brewed their first beers there back in 2012, and this brewery had a very modest capacity of only 500 litres per brew, and this gave them a yearly output of around 38,000 litres. Over the following years they did continue to build up their clientele, but as of 2015 they've got their new brewery in Landskrona, which can produce 20 hectolitres per brew, and they now have a fermentation capacity of 80 hectolitres as well. So initially they were producing their Wild Bunch beers, which was was the non-sour series. These were being produced continuously in Landskrona, but the sour patch beers, which were the mixed fermentation sours and the speciality one-off things, they were being brewed in Jurslev for about 1.5 years before all of the production was moved up to Landskrona in 2017. And this was when they created a separate area in the brewery for the mixed fermentation. They've also got the Veiled series as well, and I've reviewed a few of these for you on the channel, but these are the barrel-aged beers, and they use a variety of different yeast strains as well. And in 2020, they also started distilling a little bit as well, and they released their first products from the distillation range in the latter part of this year as well. One of the other interesting points about this brewery is that back in 2014 they caused a little bit of a stir because they withdrew completely from Systembolaget in Sweden, which is the nationalised alcohol shops. Basically anything above 3.5% alcohol in Sweden has to be sold in Systembolaget as part of the nationalised alcohol selling system. So when they did that, they decided to focus on exports abroad, and after an absence of about 2 years they returned to Systembolaget in 2016, and they've just been putting beers out there ever since, which is great, because I think it's a terrible shame if you've got a very good brewery like this but you can't get their beers in Sweden. And I think when they scaled up, that was when they decided, right, no, we're going to get our beers back into Systembolaget and go for the local market as well, which I was very thankful for. But yeah, as of November 2020, when I'm reviewing this beer for you, these guys have produced in the region of 190 different kinds of beer, and as I say, the overwhelming majority of these beers are sour beers, and I think I've probably reviewed about 20 or so beers from these guys over the years, and like I said, I've had some very, very good ones. So yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Brekeriet for the moment. I always enjoy reviewing the new beers from these guys. This is one, like I said, that I've just never got around to reviewing because I've had other things. But yeah, I have to say, very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. But that's all I can really tell you about Brekeriet for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all those different beers that they've done. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then. I'm very curious to see what this beer has in store for us, like I said. So as you can see, the artwork on this one is pretty typical of what you would expect from Brekeriet. I do like their kind of quite simple artwork that they have, I have to say. So it says on the back here, there you can see the text, it says Sour Patch Lusse Lelle is part of our collection of beers known as the Sour Patch, fermented with different wild yeast strains and lactic acid bacteria cultures. So yeah, this one contains wheat and rye, so it should be quite interesting. Of course, you do have the saffron in there as well. It's got a little bit of lactose in it, mjölksyra bacteria. Is that sour milk bacteria, if I'm translating it right? I don't know if that is just some kind of, it's a variant of lactose. Yeah, so this one should be quite interesting actually. But yeah, water, yeah, always. You always need a good bit of water in your beers, as they say. But yeah, as you can see, there is the standard Brekeriet bottle cap on this one. Like I said earlier, this one is a 6.5% sour beer, so a little bit stronger than quite a few of the other ones that I've had from Brekeriet in the past, in the 330 bottles that is. So yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. The Lusse Lelle. Yeah. So, as I say, this is probably going to be one of the most quirky beers that I'll come across. Oh, look at that colour. You can see the saffron in that. Yeah, damn. I always liked saffron rice when I was eating Indian food, so saffron's something that I've always really enjoyed. But I tell you something, I didn't quite expect a beer as bright in colour as that. And there's a wee bit of sediment left on the bottom there, so maybe I should have sugared up the bottom of the bottle a little bit more. But yeah, the other thing I always like about Brekeriet beers, from Skåne with love. So yeah, let's get this guy tasted then. I'm curious about this beer. So as you can see, this one is one of the brightest orange beers that I've come across. That just looks like, you know, some kind of tropical fruit juice that you'd pour out a carton. It really does. There was very little head on this one. It was a kind of bright sort of white thing here, but you can see there is just a very, very thin white foamy layer around the edge of the glass with this one. I mean, the colour of that beer is incredible. It almost reminds me of the old Sunny Delight. I don't know if they had that in Sweden, but it reminds me of that kind of Sunny Delight stuff that we used to drink back home in Scotland. I think that was withdrawn from the market because it was found to be really bad for health. But yeah, the colour of this beer, I have to say, is pretty damn incredible. And that's the saffron. That's the colour of the saffron that is going to do that. Saffron's always that lovely bright yellow. But it just, you know, this what beer could pass for some kind of New England IPA. But the colour is just, it just really strikes me as being a little bit different, I have to say. But yeah, there's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass. You can see one or two little ones heading up towards the bottom of the surface there. But otherwise, it looks like a pretty normal New England IPA or something like this. But of course it isn't. It is a sour beer with saffron added into it. So this should be quite cool. If I put my fingers behind the glass, you can see there is a good degree of haze to this one. But yeah, it certainly looks very, very nice. So let's have a closer look at the aroma of this one then, and just see how we get on. I'm very, very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. Oh, that really does smell like the Lusse Lelle. I always forget how to pronounce that, but it really does smell like those little kind of S-shaped, or figure eight. I guess figure eight's probably a better description of the shape. They always smell like those little figure eight buns that you get for Lucille. So it really does smell like that. You've got a lovely kind of sort of bready, bunny type base to this one, and that'll be the rye and the wheat that's giving you that. They'll be coming in combination there. So yeah, you've got that lovely white kind of. It's not quite a sponge cake, but it's not a million miles away. It is like a muffin or something like that, like a kind of plain muffin. The beer really smells like that. It smells like those Lusse Lelle. It really, really does. And it's a very difficult thing to describe, because I know some of you will be watching this review from outside of Sweden, but this beer really does just smell like Lusse Lelle. I can never pronounce that word. I always go into the shop, the bakery, to Mormor's Bageri, and ask for Lusse instead of Lussebulle. Lucillebulle. And they always just look at me. I'm like, yeah, it's the one word that I always forget in Swedish. But yeah, this one smells absolutely lovely. It's got that lovely kind of white bready bun kind of base to it. I really, really like how that goes together, and you can smell the saffron is just infused into it. I mean, in fairness, the one thing I would say about this beer, it's actually quite simple in terms of its aroma. It's quite straight shooting, and I often find that with quite a few sour beers. I don't find sour beers to be madly complex in their aromas compared to regular fermentation beers, but that's one of the things I like about them. For me, sour beers, it's all about the transition of flavour that they make, because when you take them in, they're very sharp and very puckering, but then the flavour just kind of, it makes a transition and it becomes nice and smooth and sweet. That's what I really like about the sour beers. I don't expect these to be madly complex, to be quite honest. But yeah, the malty aroma that comes out of this one really just strikes me, and if you've watched the channel for any length of time, you'll know that I'm a sucker for a good malt base. I really like how this one goes together, so thumbs up to Brekeriet for how this beer goes together. I really like this one. Yeah, lovely stuff. So yeah, the malt base, lovely and big and bready and bunny. You get all of that. You can smell a little bit of the rye kind of graininess in there. You get that lovely white bready note from the wheat, and you also just feel the saffron infused into that. It really smells like Lussebulle, definitely. On the hoppy side of things then, there isn't much more to report on the malty side of things, other than that you might get one or two little woody elements out of this beer underneath. But on the hoppy side of things, it's got a lovely, bright, grassy kind of note to it, and you do get a little bit of floral aromaticity out of this one as well. I'd be curious to know exactly what hops they've used in this, maybe a little bit of Magnum or something like that, because it does have quite a bright floral aromaticity. But I think the yeast in this one, the sour yeasts, or the wild yeast we should say, are really kind of promoting that. So this beer feels really floral and aromatic and quite grassy in a sense as well. So I really like that about it. Yeah, and it's got a really nice kind of fruitiness to it as well. The fruitiness is a little bit hard to place, to be honest, because it does have a little bit of that kind of soft apricot-y, peary sort of thing to it in my mind. I do get quite a little bit of that out of it. So I'd be curious to know what hop has been put in this. Have they put something like a little bit of Citra, or one of the American hops? I wouldn't be surprised if there's a wee bit of something like that in there, or maybe one of the New Zealand ones that's a little bit lower in alpha acid, something like that. But yeah, the aroma out of this beer, yeah, you do get a little bit of an apricot-y, papaya type thing out of this one. and you do get some of those peary esters as well. You get a little bit of a sharper appley thing. For me, the sourness that you get out of this beer, it does have a wee bit of that lemony citricy side to it, but for me it's quite an appley peary type sourness that's coming out of this one as well. But yeah, overall this beer, it's got quite a sweet smelling malt base. It's got a nice juicy, slightly tropically leaning fruit character, and the kind of sour side of this beer has a real bit of that citricy zest kind of thing. So I really like how this I really like how it goes together. I really like how everything in this beer goes together. So yeah, for me the aroma of this beer is absolutely lovely, and it makes me just even more curious to try this one. So yeah, let's have a look at this beer and just see how we get on. This one is the Lusse Lelle, if you like, the Lusse Lelle. Maybe the Lelle, I wonder if that's a reference to like lactobacillus. Does it tell you which one is in this? No, it just says yeast. I wish they would tell you exactly which one of the sour cultures they were using, because I think with Brekeriet, when they're using all these different sour cultures, I'd love if they told you which one it is, but I think quite a lot, in fairness to them, I think quite a lot of their yeast cultures are sort of mixed and they've developed them themselves. So maybe that's the reason for it, but I think when these guys are so into their sour beers, it would be quite cool if they put a little bit more of a kind of education element onto the bottles and said, you know, this one is brewed with Lactobacillus Brettanomyces. It would be cool if they did that, so that you could start to learn a little bit more about the different flavours and things that each of these yeasts gave you. But as I say, I think they might be using their own types of yeast at some point. As I say, I'd love to have these guys on Meet the Brewery segment and talk to them about the yeast side of things. That's where the focus of sour beer is, the yeasts, and to a degree the adjuncts as well. But yeah, let's have a taste of this beer then. This one is the Lusse Lelle. It comes in at 6.5% ABV, a sour beer with saffron added to it, and it smells like Lusse Lelle from here in Sweden. So yeah, let's get stuck into this one. Very curious about this beer. Slange, skål, cheers. Ooh, yeah. What I'm going to say about this one is, this is a flavour that strikes you as very strange when you take it in, but I have to say, I really like what this one's aiming for. The saffron. I actually expected this beer from the colour of it. I expected it to be a little bit more kind of thicker and bready in the malt base, but it's actually got a little bit more of that kind of slickness to it. It's almost as if it's got a little bit of that kind of woody kind of slickness that's forming the backbone in this one. So this beer, it has the flavour profile I expected for sure, but things are just emphasised in a completely different way from what the aroma was kind of intimating at when we first looked at this beer. So yeah, this is really quirky in that sense as well. But I will say I like this one. And this is what I like about Brekeriet, is you'll find beers like this that are just that are so kind of random that they just work. You know, that's what I would say about the things that these guys do. I really like a lot of these beers that they produce. I mean, my favourite ones, of course, as I say, Purple Rain, Wrapped in Red. I need to try Ruby James as well. I can't remember if I tried that one, but that was one that I saw in the shop and I was quite curious about, so I need to check if I've had that or not. But yeah, this beer I think is really lovely. This is very quirky compared to some of the other ones, as I said. So yeah, where to start with this one then? So what I'll say is, when you take this beer in, this one does have a little bit, quite a little bit actually, of that kind of puckering quality to it, and I really like that about this beer. I really respect how that comes out in this one. So yeah, nice little bit of a citricy kind of sharpness to the beer, which I think works very, very well. But you've also got a really nice, how would we say? You also have a very nice kind of smoothness and slickness to this beer that develops later on. So when you take this beer in, you get quite a bit of a kind of citricy note out of this beer. But I would say the sharpness of the beer in the beginning is quite rounded, in a sense that it really gives you some kind of appley and peary sort of sharpness, a little bit of that appley and peary kind of puckering thing in the beginning as well. And then it just it gives you quite a bit of juiciness on the front of the palate as well. Then the rest of the flavour just kind of rolls out on the top of the palate. So the impact of this beer when you take it in is quite interesting. It really does have a good little bit of a puckering quality on the at the front of the palate. Yeah. So yeah, the malt base in this one, let's look at that. The malt base, I mean, in the middle third of your palate and the back third of your palate, you do have this nice kind of, it's almost like a kind of pale malty character. It really has a kind of smooth pale malty note to it, and it's got a real slickness to it. I mean, it's not kind of soft and bready or anything like that. It is quite smooth and really quite slick. So in the middle of your palate, I think you're actually getting quite a bit of the kind of wheaty side of the beer, and then the wheat kind of spreads back towards the back third of your palate, but then you start to get a few more of the slightly grainy rye notes out of this one. So yeah, it's a little bit more white bready in the middle of the palate, but then as you move towards the back third of the palate, it's a little bit more kind of brown bready, if you like, a little bit more of a kind of wholemeal bready sort of thing. But as you go further into the aftertaste, you can feel the sort of slickness that the beer has, that just dissipates a little bit, and the breadiness just comes out a little bit more as well, actually. So I really like how that side of things goes together, actually. Yeah, the flavour profile of this beer, malty flavour profile of this beer, I think, is really quite nice. Again, it's very straightforward, but I think it really suits the whole idea that this beer is supposed to kind of be like the Lusse Lelle. So yeah, I really like that about this one. Yeah. So yeah, for me, the malt base it's straightforward, as I say, but it really suits the other things that are going on in the beer. If you go to the front corners of your palate, then move diagonally back, then you get a few kind of woody elements. You can feel a little bit of a woodiness coming out of this beer, I think, the further that you go into the palate. But in my mind, there's not too much else to report on the malty side of things. Like I say, it's got a nice bit of slickness to it, and I think that really suits it. On the hoppy side of things then, back corners of the palate, you do have a little touch of earthiness there. I'm wondering from the flavours out of the hops here if it is a little bit more of a noble hop that's been used in these. Remember, it's quite often in these, I don't know if you can term the Brekeriet beers more as kettle sours rather than anything else, but it is quite common in kettle sours that they'll use older hops that are not going to overpower the sour qualities of the beer. So yeah, as I was saying, I think there might be a little bit of noble hop in this one. Just the way some of the earthiness comes out in this beer, it's quite a smooth earthiness. You do get a nice little bit of that quite bright floral character as well, and then round the front curve of the palate you've just got a nice light grassiness in there. I do wonder if this beer maybe has something along the lines of, you know, a German Hallertauer Tettnanger, or maybe a Slovenian kind of Styrian Golding or something like that. It really, the beer does have that little bit of a vibe in it, but it's quite a common thing, as I said, to add older hops into these beers that are not going to dominate the the sourness of the beer and kind of put that down a little bit, because of course in this kind of beer that's exactly where you want the focus to be. But yeah, the thing with this beer and the saffron, because we haven't really mentioned that yet, I mean the saffron side of the beer, as I was talking about with that slick kind of bready side of things, the saffron just feels infused into the whole thing with that beer. It's just the saffron really feels infused into that whole bready backbone of the beer. So, I mean, it's really interesting that you've got that nice saffron, which is a spice, but in a sense it really gives the beer a kind of sweetness, if you like. And the saffron and the sort of lighter side of the hops, the grassiness, they have a really interesting relationship, I think. So it's really quirky just to see how how this beer just kind of fits together in that sense, and I really like that about this one. It's just one of these ones where all the flavours just fit together really well. As I said, with a lot of these sour beers, they're by no means the most complex of things, but everything just kind of slots together quite nicely in this one. So yeah, I really like how that goes together with this beer. But yeah, on the fruity side of things then, as I said, I've told you a little bit about the sour kind of impact that this beer has. So as I said, when you take this one and you've got quite a little bit of a kind of appley, sort of peary sharpness to the beer when you take it in, and that just rolls out, the juiciness of this beer just rolls out across the kind of front part of your tongue and goes further back. Yeah, I think the the beer, to a degree, it does have a little bit of an apricot on that front third of your palate. As I always say to you, get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So you do get that, kind of on the front of the palate there, and it kind of gives you a sort of a soft apricot-y, almost papaya-like thing in there. It's got a little bit of that, and that forms the kind of backbone of the beer. But as I say, the sour notes come in on top of that, and in fairness, on the very front edge of the tongue, you've got a wee bit of a kind of lemony, zesty, grassy sort of thing coming out of the beer as well. So yeah, I really like how that side of this beer goes together as well. You do start to get a little bit of zestiness out of this beer the further that you go into the aftertaste, and I think the floral notes from the hops start to push their way out a little bit more as well. So yeah, sort of apricot-y, kind of almost papaya-like type base to this one. Then on top of it, you've got these nice kind of peary, appley sort of esters in there. That are giving you the sour side of the beer. So like I said, when you take it in, it's quite an appley, peary sort of sour side, and then it just spreads, the juiciness of the beer just spreads back a little bit and over the top of that. So I really like how the fruity side of this beer complements everything. It's one of these beers, as I say, where everything just kind of fits together. You might think a saffron sour is quite an unusual thing, and it certainly is that, but everything else, the breadiness of the malt base, the way that the saffron's infused into it, the nice kind of hoppy notes where the sort of floral aromaticity and the kind of grassy notes build a little bit later on, and you've also got those nice kind of fruity sort of things coming out of the beer as well, and just the sharpness in the beginning. All of that just fits together really, really nicely actually. I love how this beer goes together, so it gets a big thumbs up from me. So in terms of the mouthfeel then, as I've said to you, I've always found that sour beers are a little bit sort of lighter, if you like, than regular beers. So for me, overall I find this beer quite light-bodied, but I would say it's kind of normal. It's kind of normal in the sense of it being a sour beer, wild ale, whatever. So yeah, it's kind of right in the middle of the spectrum. It's got a real slickness to it overall. I feel it's got a real kind of slick, silky sort of thing to it, which I very much like. The carbonation is quite smooth, so it's got a very wet, kind of clean mouthfeel to it overall as well. But the malty base is really nice in this one. It's quite smooth, but again, it's quite slick. You can get that little bit of saffron spice underneath. You've got a little touch of hoppy bitterness to this one. I would be surprised if this beer is over 15 or 20 IBUs, and you've got just a little bit of that kind of sour sharpness in the beginning, and a lot of nice kind of juicy and quite citrusy and zesty fruit on the front part of the palate. So I mean, overall, this is a really, really nice take on. It's one of my favourite sour beers I think I've had from Brekeriet. I really, really like this one, and I'm disappointed in myself that I didn't try this earlier on. But yeah, this beer gets a massive thumbs up from me, and I certainly like how this goes together. So again, big thumbs up to Brekeriet for this one. The Lusse Lelle. Try this beer if you get the chance. It's 6.5% as well. It's stupidly drinkable, but 6.5% is a fairly manageable ABV, of course. But yeah, I really like this one, and I'm glad that I finally got around to trying this. So I hope that, I hope that you guys have enjoyed my take on this beer as well. So let's leave it at that. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Brekeriet as well. We will no doubt return to these guys at some point in the fairly near future. I do have one of the veal beers in the fridge that I need to take a look at sometime soon, so you will see that at some stage. But in the meantime, this was the Lusse Lelle 6.5% sour ale with saffron in it, brewed for Lusse here in Sweden, which I believe ends on the 13th of December. So go get yourself some Lusse Bulle, get yourself a couple of bottles of Lusse Lelle, and you will have a very nice tasty evening, we should say. So yeah, thank you again for watching my reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Brekeriet, and I will catch you guys in the next review. The Lusse Lelle sour beer with saffron at 6.5% ABV from Brekeriet in Landskrona here in Skåne in the very south of Sweden. Slange, skål, cheers.